Happy Maximizing Monday, everybody. I wanted to come back and finish part 2 of the power of falling in love with the process for growth, part 2. I'm going to be reading out of 1 Samuel 16 and 1 Samuel 17. Um, this is a touchy subject because I think sometimes we get excited and anxious about stepping out, doing new things, but not realizing that the most important part is falling in love with the process for growth. Like taking our time, walking through, growing through every part of training that we have to grow through and go through. And I think it's so important and vital that growth is present in our life going through these trainings and process that God allow us to. So I think that's so important, and we have to make sure that we fall in love with that process and begin to allow God to process us and train us through it all, right? So I'm going to turn to 1 Samuel 16, and I'm going to read that in 1 Samuel 17, and then I'll jump into exhortation and sharing what has dropped in my spirit about this whole deal. I think it's so important that we take our time and train and grow through the very things that we need to grow through and get trained through in every area, however that looks, so that we can be effective. So, promotion can happen, power can increase, knowledge will increase, wisdom begin to grow leaps and bounds in our life, so that we'll be able to navigate life. We'll be able to navigate the very gifts and callings and anointings that God has placed on our life, because we now have came up to that maturity level. I think it's so important that we arrive matured and effective in those areas, so that the lives and the nation of people that's assigned to us will be impacted. Their life will be transformed, because we took the time out to fall in love with that process. We allow God to process us through growth and maturity and wisdom, and that will grow us to where we need to be at that appointed time. So welcome you guys to Maximizing Monday. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for taking out your time to come into the room to get empowered. Okay, so let's turn. I'm going to turn to 1 Samuel. And 16. Basically, let me paraphrase about 1 Samuel 16. Basically, David being anointed king, and how God going to 1 Samuel 16, anointed king, his process of how that looked. And 1 Samuel 17, basically where David went through the training process. When David and Goliath, he had to slay the Goliath. That was part of one of the tests and trainings that David had to go through for his growth and maturity, and the areas of the anointing where God has anointed him king. So let's jump into it. 1 Samuel 16, David was anointed king, right? Now the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king amongst his sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears it, he will kill me. But the Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice the Lord. Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you shall do. You shall anoint for me the one I name to you. So Samuel did what the Lord said and went to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming and said, do you come peaceably? And he said, peaceably? I have come to sacrifice. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. So it was when they came that he took at Eliab and said, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said, Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, but for man looks at the appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. See, even how you show up in life, it does not matter about your outer appearance. It's what God says about you. How God presented for you to look at that appointed time, because God chose you regardless of how somebody else sees you. So in this life, regardless to how somebody else try to see you or judge your book by it's the outside of the cover, it's what's on the inside. It's about your heart posture. So Jesse called Abinadab and made his pass before Samuel. And he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Then Jesse made Shammah pass by, and he said, neither has the Lord chosen this one. Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen these. And Samuel said to Jesse, are all the young men here? Then he said, there remains yet the youngest. That's another thing. It does not matter about your age. When God anoint you and appoint you to do a thing for the kingdom, it does not matter your age. Even Jesus did his job that God called him to do about his Father's business at a young age. He even lost his life, or gave up his life at a young age, 33. Check this out, y'all. Talking about David now. And Samuel said to Jesse, are all the young men here? Then he said, there remains yet the youngest, and there he is keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send and bring him, for we will not sit down till he comes here. So he sent and brought him in. Now he was ruddy. He was ruddy with bright eyes and good looking. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for he is the one. Talking about David. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of the brothers. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from the day forward. So Samuel arose and went Ramah. So this is where the shift happens with David's leader. This is another thing we have to be mature and aware of when we have leaders that have a distressed spirit. Listen to me. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servant said to him, surely a distressing spirit from God is troubling you. Let our master now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who is a skillful player on the harp. And it shall be that he will play it with his hand when the distressing spirit from God is upon you, and you shall be well. So Saul said to the servants, provide now a man who can play and bring him here to me. And guess who was, guess it, hold tight, because guess who it's going to be? Then one of the servants answered and said, look, I have seen a son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, who is the skillful in playing, a mighty man of valor, a man of war, a prudent in speech and handsome person, and the Lord is with him. Meaning he had already received the anointing of the Lord. Therefore, Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, send me your son David. He requested David because David had all these things that he were looking for to do, even to play the harp to ease the distressing spirit, which distressing spirit is a tormenting spirit. Send me your son David, who is with the sheep. And Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, a young goat, and sent them by his son David to Saul. So David came to Saul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. So, in other words, the training, David was accepting the training under Saul's reign at that moment, meaning he didn't switch words. He didn't question why he had to train under the reign of Saul at this time. He was just obedient because God had sent for him to be anointed, to be king. But there was a process for all of that had to take place for him to grow in these areas. Then Saul sent to Jesse, saying, please let David stand before me, for he has found favor in my sight. And so it was whenever the spirit from God was upon Saul that David would take a harp and play it with his hand. Even as little as playing a harp to ease his leader's distress of spirit that God had put upon him. He did not even question part of the training. All of this is part of the training. All of this is part of the shift in his leadership and training because he was anointed to be king. His time was coming up for an appointment. Then Saul will become refreshed and well, and the distressing spirit will depart from him. 1Samuel and 17th chapter. David and Goliath. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle and were gathered at Sochot, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Sochot and Zekiah in Phimnis and Damni. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up the battle array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a side of one mountain, and Israel stood on the other side with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath, the giant, right? From Gath, whose height was 6 cubits in a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and a weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and shielded barrier went before him. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle. I am not a Philistine. You, the servants of Saul, choose a man for yourselves. Let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of Ephrathite of Bethlehem of Judah, whose name was Jesse, who had 8 sons, and the man was old, advanced in years, in the days of Saul. Then the oldest 3 sons of Jesse had gone to follow Saul to the battle. The name of his 3 sons who went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, next to him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest, and the 3 oldest followed Saul. But David occasionally went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. No matter what the situation was, he stayed in training. He stayed so he can get the growth that he needed in every area of his life. No matter what the job or task was, he trained and stayed. And the Philistine drew near and presented himself 40 days, morning and evening. Then Jesse said to his son David, take now for your brothers an ephah of this dry grain and these 10 loaves. Run to your brothers at the camp and carry these 10 cheeses to the captain of their 1,000, and see how brothers fare, and bring back news of them. Now Saul and they all, the men of Israel, were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, took the things, and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to fight and shouting for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had drawn up in the battle array, army against army. And David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. Then as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man fled from him, were dreadfully afraid. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel, and it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will eat rich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father house exemption from taxes in Israel. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine, takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should not defy the armies of the living God? Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you, Hazel. Same to you. Thank you so much for the compliment. And the people answered him in this manner, saying, so shall it be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was aroused against David. And he said, why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and your insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Then he turned from him toward another and said the same thing. And these people answered him as the first ones did. Now, when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported them to Saul and sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight with the Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from his mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the power of the lion and from the power of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of his Philistine. Now, David understood the magnitude of the training he'd been through. So nevertheless, he had the confidence and had the growth and had the anointing and had the empowerment to go against this Philistine because he already defeated something that was stronger than that. Stay with, listen. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Now, his leader bid him his speed because he reminded him, oh, I've been through that training already. So now I am equipped and qualified and anointed to have God's okay and say from not only for God, but also from the leader. That training made a difference. Now he's empowered to do the very thing that he was trained to do, to defeat this Goliath. So Saul clothed David with his armor. He put on a bronze helmet on his head, and he also clothed him with a coat of mail. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, and he had not tested them. And David said, Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. Now see, David comes back and reminds his leader, I'm holding you accountable to let you know I have not been trained to carry this type of weight for battle. See, that's another thing in life. When we go ahead of our time and not have that proper training, we can possibly be defeated because we hadn't tested that armor. We hadn't tested in those areas. So David reminded his leader, like, wait a minute. You about to go get me slayed out here because I have not tested in these armor of what you want me to use. I hadn't tested in this type of weight class yet. He hadn't had that training. David said, Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook. Why? Because David already been trained with those type of tools. And he put them in the shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. He drew near to the Philistine, so the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. The man who bore the shield went before him, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good looking. So the Philistine said to David, I am a dog that you come to me with sticks. And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, with a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into the hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcass of the camp of the Philistines to the bird of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God of Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, but for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you our hands. So it was, when the Philistine arose and came draw near to meet David, that David hurried, ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag, took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and struck the Philistine and killed him. But there were no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood over the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of his sheath, and killed him, cut off his head with it. My Lord. See now what I'm saying? The power of falling in love with the process. The power of falling in love with the process of growth. That's the growth you need from the training you had to go through. He defeated the Philistine. He defeated Goliath. Okay, so, wow, that's powerful. David took his slingshot, a smooth stone, put that stone in the slingshot, and hit Goliath in the middle of his forehead, where the stone sunk back into his forehead. And when the Philistines saw that the champion was dead, they fled. Now the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines as far as the entrance of the valley, and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell along the road of Shiram, even as far as Gath and Ekron. Then the children of Israel returned from chasing the Philistines, and they plundered their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine, brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. When Saul saw David going against the Philistine, he said to the Abner, the commander of the army, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as your soul lives, O king, I do not know. So the king said, inquire whose son this young man is. Then as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him, brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand, and said, Saul said to him, whose son are you, young man? So David answered, I am the son of the servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. So that's it in a nutshell, guys. Thank you for joining. This is what I'm talking about. The power of falling in love with the process of growth. Taking that extra initiative to say, I'm going not to go ahead of God. I'm going to wait till God command. I'm going to Stay under my leader's training. I'm going to train. I'm going to get empowered. I'm going to grow. I'm going to build character. I'm going to do the very things it is that my leaders are requiring me to do at that moment, so I can be empowered and I can be powerful in these areas of growth, that it will win me every battle. You don't want to go before a battle that you're not mature to fight in, and you haven't trained and you hadn't gone through those trenches, and then you get to the battle and you unarmed. You get to the battle, you're not strong enough to handle. You get to the battle, you hadn't trained in those areas. Listen, the power of falling in love with the process of growth. Part 2. If you missed the first part, go back, #replay. Go back and watch this replay. I'm telling y'all, it's so key and important to fall in love with the process of growth. So when you arrive at your appointed time, at your anointed and appointed time to do the work of the kingdom, to do the work of your Father, you will arrive with the power and the anointing that God has equipped you from day one. It's in your DNA. It's Maximizing Monday, y'all. Fall in love with the process of growth. So when you arrive, you will be sure and very sure that you're empowered with the very thing, and you equipped with what God gave you to win the battle. Love yourself and go be great.